Hello, everybody, and welcome to A Day for Adventure, the premier outdoor podcast that will get you off your butt and outside. I'm Ben.
I'm Will.
And I'm Trevor.
And in this week's episode, we're going to talk about how to get into canoeing. So, canoeing is just another one of those ways that we can kind of go out and enjoy nature. And it's actually, in my opinion, possibly one of the most fun ways. I don't know, I might be biased. I'm a water guy. I tend to spend a lot of time on the water, but there's a lot of reasons why somebody might go canoeing over maybe hiking or sailing or something like that, like what I do. One of the best ones is it is a really, really, really good upper body workout. So if you're more into working out, canoeing is a really good one for that. Canoes are able to actually carry a whole lot more gear when you've got them fully loaded up, which means that in a lot of cases, you can get to a lot of more remote places and have a lot more stuff when you get there. So that means that, you could have a longer experience out in the backcountry, or you could have a more luxurious experience in the backcountry. In my opinion, it is by far the most calming form of transport you'll ever take, unless you have William in the back of your canoe, because he'll be just shouting at me to stop paddling so hard. But canoeing is a really, really fun way to get out and have a great time.
While it can be one of the most calming forms of transport, it does have its own unique sense of safety issues. And to prevent you from getting hurt or dying, you'll want to keep a few things in mind. First and foremost, whenever you're on the water, no matter what you're doing, you need to be comfortable swimming, both in a life vest and not. You don't have to be amazing, you just have to be competent. And the reason you want to be able to swim in a life vest is because you should always be wearing a life vest while on the water. This is both to keep you from flat out drowning, but it will also serve as insulation if it's cold and can help you be spotted if you run into an accident on the water. Speaking of accidents, just like with hiking, always have a buddy. Never go out alone. And ideally, you should also have a buddy boat. So you have two boats on the water. So if one runs into issues, they can either help rescue you or get you out. Now, some of the kind of duh moments of canoeing is just to not paddle or be on the water when there's thunder or lightning, because you're in a canoe, which is wet, on an open body of water. You will really have a poor time enjoying nature if you get electrocuted. When you hear thunder, you want to be waiting at least 30 minutes, if not more if the weather still looks kind of sketchy. If the weather looks stormy before you head out, you may want to rethink your trip. It's better to reschedule than go into a place that is dangerous. Additionally, since you're on the water, there's no shade. And the sun also reflects off the water, so if you don't have sun protection, you will get burned. Doesn't matter if it's not that hot, you have no protection. It will end very poorly for you if you don't have sunscreen and clothes that cover the sun. Additionally, you'll want to be wary of heat and cold related issues, such as heat exhaustion, but also hypothermia. Since you're more likely to get wet on the water, colder weather can wick away that heat, and you can get hypothermia in that 40 to 60 degree weather. Really be careful about this. In addition to all of those canoe-focused safety, we still have the fundamentals, which are let someone know where you're going. That way, if you run into trouble, they know where to send help, and go within your skill level. If you've never canoed before, I'd recommend first learning how to, and then getting on the water.
I work on water. I'm a sailing instructor in my spare time. It is really, really important that you do not overestimate your skill on any watercraft of any type. There's a lot of things that can go wrong on the water, and oftentimes you do want to make sure that you don't push your limits. A lot of people think that they know a lot more than they do. A lot of people think they're a lot more skilled than they actually are. And that is usually what causes people to flip boats or fill their boats with water accidentally, or to fall off of a boat, or all sorts of other things. So do not overestimate your level of skill.
Well, one way to increase your skill is just by learning how to canoe, whether you're a complete novice, amateur, or if you've done it for a little while, but it's been a few months or something. There are some places like the American Canoe Association that do specific classes on canoeing, different skill levels. There's also different outdoor events and courses through like your local canoe clubs, your local REIs, some scouting troops if you're a part of that, or some of them do public ones. Going off the REI ones, REI and other outfitters are good trips for like experienced paddlers. So they plan out a trip and you'll be on the water for even multiple days or just a day. And then lastly, something we talk about in almost every time gear comes up is going with friends. So if you go with friends who already know what they're doing, they can teach you. And then you don't have to pay for gear or pay for a class besides, I don't know, getting a pizza for your friend as a thank you. I know my main canoeing that I do right now is with my outdoors club, and I just use all their gear. And there's plenty of people who know more than I do. So it's nice going down a river a day with them.
So now that you kind of know how to learn how to canoe, we got to figure out where we're actually going to go and canoe. So there's all sorts of resources that you can find both on the internet from local jurisdictions about where you are allowed to canoe, where you can canoe, where are good places to canoe. So probably one of the best places to look that we actually found researching this video was paddling.com. It just has a lot of possible locations listed in general. That's just a good resource just to start off with. But just to kind of clarify, canoeing can take place on a lot of different bodies of water. You'd be surprised at how many can actually be done on without any real concern. In Wisconsin, we really have two types that we do. We have lake canoeing, which is kind of just small inland lakes like Lake Geneva here. And then we have waterways. Now, fun fact about the state of Wisconsin is we actually have a stream access law that essentially allows us to be able to canoe on private property as long as you stay within the shorelines on navigable streams. Do that at your own leisure, risk, whatever. Some really good spots to look for, though, for canoeing are definitely going to be public parks and other places that have large bodies of water. Just note, again, like I said, be aware of your local laws and regulations. Wisconsin, we're a very lax state about canoeing, but there are some other places that maybe aren't. Just note that if you're canoeing in waters that are under Coast Guard's jurisdiction, like where I actually go and sail, you actually are required to bring quite a bit more equipment in some cases on certain types of boats. Usually it's more dependent on the length of the boat. So for where I am, it's any boat over, I think, 14 feet going out on to any Coast Guard enforced area has to have flares, whistles, and other forms of signaling equipment, including a radio. You also have to have navigational devices if you have even larger vessels. So that's something to pay attention to. Always check, especially when with the Coast Guard. My experience with them has been very good. I've met a couple of them in the past, and they've been very nice about it. But just something to always check out for. Otherwise, you might be working within a national parks jurisdiction, and they might also have other forms of laws and regulations, usually involving signaling equipment or stuff to make sure that waterways are not getting polluted and things. So another really good one, and this is from one of my favorite experiences canoeing, is looking for outfitters. So probably the most popular place to go canoeing probably in the whole United States is the boundary waters between the US and Canada. And out there's outfitters for days. So you can go and look and find the places that will be good places to go canoeing.
Speaking of finding where to canoe, you may be wondering how to get a canoe. And you have a few options. The first one is flat out buying the canoe, which we personally don't recommend because it's really expensive. It's large and difficult to store and transport. You're going to need to actually set your car up to be able to safely store it or safely transport it. So it's a big commitment, and it's not really recommended unless you are really into canoeing and you have the money and space. You also, if you don't want to spend money, you have borrowing, which again, So the storage and transportation are difficult if that you are flat out borrowing the gear and they're not going with you, but it is free. If you do decide to borrow, follow the rules and best practices we have talked about in our cheap versus expensive video, so you can both keep your friends and just generally not be a jerk. And finally, we have renting. This is personally what I recommend when you are just starting out, unless you have that friend who's going with you on the trips. As for in short periods of time, a lot of waterfronts will allow you to rent canoes, especially if it's a more public park that's more tourist friendly. They're going to be able to rent out canoes for a short amount of time. If you're using longer treks, you're going to be using more specific outdoor outfitters. Just remember that with renting, you're going to have limited selection and you have to be careful about not wrecking the canoes, as even if you rent for cheap, you're still going to have to pay for it if you break it.
I have just one more that I'd like to add, and this is just from things I've heard my dad say, and that is you could actually build a canoe. Now, I will admit that that's probably even more expensive than buying it, but if you're really, really savvy or you're really, really into building stuff, it's a really, really cool project. I have a friend that did build one, and it is one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen in my life.
Also on that, wooden canoes are the heaviest canoes out there. So if you're building your own, you should be a little strong too so you can transport it.
Yeah, make sure that whatever canoe you get, you should be able to portage it with two people. As somebody who has actually portaged a canoe by myself, it is not fun. And that was with an aluminum one, so that was light, pretty light.
All right. And so we're going to end it off today with some good old canoeing tips. So kind of building off what Will said on renting, where some waterfronts will do it. There's a lot of lakes that have little boat kiosk setups where they do like stand-up paddleboarding, kayaks, and canoes. And you can rent them from there for very short periods of time. And that's great because it is best to start off in lakes because they are flat and static water. So you most likely won't have big waves trying to knock you over or constant running water pushing you in a direction in case you need to stop for some reason. But actually getting in on the water when you have your paddle in hand and you're doing your strokes in the water, there's a lot of important things when it comes to that. First off, you want to do long, slow strokes to pick up as much water as you want to push you forward. You don't want to do all those short, fast ones because that'll just tire you out and you'll get nowhere. Secondly, when you're putting your paddle into the water, make sure the paddle itself is submerged pretty deeply so you don't have any of the big flat part of the paddle above the water because you'll catch more water that way and propel yourself farther forward. And then when doing those strokes, you want to use your whole body. So most people, when they first start out, they're just using their shoulders and they're just pushing the water and maybe like a little bit of their elbows. You want to keep your shoulders almost in place and turn everything with the core of your body. That will tire you out less, use the most of your strength in one push, and just allow you to get farther for longer periods of time. And then in canoes, most canoes are set up to do two people paddling. There are single person canoes, but I'm just going to take the assumption that when you're starting, you're going to have a buddy. You want to time your strokes with your buddy so that you guys are pushing at the same time. Now, when you're trying to go straight, some people will paddle one person on the right side and one person on the left side. That's okay. When you're turning, you guys want to be paddling on the same side, though. But just make sure you can do anything that makes you guys stay in sync. I've seen scouts just yell, row, row, row. Maybe not that fast, but you get the point. There's people like me, when we're turning too much, we'll yell switch. So you take your paddle and just switch to the other side, and your partner does the same thing. And then also watch out for wind. It just makes the canoe harder to control. So if it's your very first time, you just want to go out on a calm, nice day, lake's nice and flat, because then it'll just be the easiest to work on your paddle strokes and just being comfortable in the canoe. And lastly, just a little bit, or lastly from me, getting a little more advanced, if you go portaging, so you canoe across the lake and then you have to hike for like, I don't know, half a mile, let's say. Try not to have long canoeage mileage, like when you're walking or when you're like super long paddles in the same day. And that's just to stay within your abilities, like we were talking about before.
Yeah, especially with portaging, as that can be really physically intense, even if you're good with hiking, since you're likely carrying more weight with the canoe and your gear than you are even just backpacking. You really want to be conservative in how much mileage and intensity you do with your portages, as that can tire out a group and keep you from really pushing forward on
Another
the
thing to
water.
remember, a big difference between portaging and hiking is your arms are up on the canoe. So they're not at your side swinging, which actually surprisingly helps you a lot when it comes to hiking. Having your arms at your side going in opposite of your legs. Yeah, that's what it is. So that's also something to keep in reminder. Your arms will be up, your shoulder muscles will be used while you're portaging. So it takes a whole nother type of muscle just to walk.
Thank you for listening. Next time, we will be covering essential gear for canoe trips. If you decide to go on your own fantastic trip, let us know in the comments. For now, get off your butt, get outside, and have a fantastic adventure.